Hello everyone, my name is Saira Salmon. Now, we all must face and take the journey through death at some stage, yet we live in a culture which treats death almost as a taboo subject, and we have very little understanding and context for the process, let alone knowledge of important rituals and ceremonies to help the dying on their way. My guest today has worked with both the dead and the dying, as well as healing the living, and has profound wisdom to share with us on this topic. He is David Leesley. David, welcome.
Thank you, Sarah.
Can we begin, first of all, by just giving a little bit of background about yourself? Because you've got an interesting mix of things going on with you that has led you into doing this kind of work with the dead and dying. So can you tell us a little bit of your background?
Yeah, ever since I can remember as a child, I've always been fascinated by death and dying. Working on farms, if a sheep died, we would always open it up to see if there was liver fluke or whatever the cause was, or something trapped in its throat. So I've always been interested in that sort of thing. I've always been fascinated with taxidermy. So when I was at school, I either wanted to be a priest, a taxidermist, or an undertaker. And I was seen as a bit of an oddball.
It's not your normal career choices.
Everybody else wanted to be a fireman or a policeman. I wanted to be an undertaker. But then as I started to grow older and have more awareness, and I suddenly realized that working with the dead is part of the priestly work.
Yeah.
And so, it's part of that sacred line or that lineage. So I've always known that I've come from a priestly lineage. And I think my speciality or interest in that lineage is to deal with the death and the dying more than other aspects.
Yeah. And it is very profound work, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think it can also bring up lots of suppressed emotions in you. And the suppressed emotions may be inherited from your ancestral lineage or things that have happened to you as a child where you had no authority or no say. So, in our tradition, children are usually pushed down and we're told what we can't do. But in the East, in India and places like that, the children are taught what they can do.
Yeah.
So again, it's a belief system to our culture is that, and our parents are doing the best they can. So when I was a child, the only opportunities that I had in the priestly line was Christianity.
Yes.
So I became quite a fervent Christian, which I think was the only path available to me at the time. But then as I started to grow more aware of tribal cultures and traditions, then I suddenly realized that Christianity was just a construct. But it was a stepping stone, which was very important for me at the time.
Yeah. You are a trained Celtic shaman, aren't you? Yeah. And there is, the Celts have their own beliefs around death and dying. Can you share some of that with us? Because a lot of people watching, that will be their indigenous background, where their roots trace back to, and yet we are utterly disconnected from that.
Yeah, and again, the reason why we're disconnected is because of the church. So, it always comes back to that. And, I know it's a controversial subject, but had we not had Christianity forced upon us, we would have been so more spiritually advanced that we wouldn't be having this discussion.
Yes, yeah.
And so...
and that's not Christian bashing, is it? It's just, the way things are.
Yeah, so Christianity, like all organized religions, have their place. And if you are religious and you find that being a Christian or a Buddhist or whoever it is helps you to become a better person, then it's very, very valid. So again, because we're in third dimensional, fourth dimensional consciousness, we're in duality and polarity. So there's always equals and opposites, negatives and positives. So religion is the negative aspect, and spirituality is the positives. So you can't have one aspect without the other.
Yeah.
Balance. So all these things are valid, and it just becomes a question of when you suddenly realize that organized religion is just a construct to control people through fear. Once you've got that point, then you can start moving out of your head
Yeah.
So the head is where religion is, which is masculine in polarity. It's illusion, confusion, and delusion. And the heart, which is feminine, knowing, sensing, and feeling. So this is spirituality here, religion there.
Yeah.
But sometimes to get to this point, you need to go through that point as well.
Yeah.
So again, it's finding the balance.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's a spectrum, isn't it? And ideally, it's the middle way that we're looking for.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with the Celtic tradition, it's hard to distinguish between what is pure Celtic and what is other traditions which we've inherited through our different mixed lineages. So there are lots of anthropologists, etc., who say that no such thing as the Celts. You know, who are they? Where did they come from? You know, so you might say that we're actually ancient Britons.
Yeah.
And whatever that means, because you know all the different migratory routes in the past, everybody brought their traditions with them. So they brought their deities as well as their demons.
Yeah.
The same thing is happening today with mass migration and refugees. Is that they, you know, where they were in their culture, they had priests and priestesses who controlled the deity consciousness and the demonic consciousness. But when they come out of their cultural areas of control, they bring their demons with them, and they are then let loose in the West, who have got no boundaries. And so it's smorgasbord time for those who are vulnerable.
Yes, yes, and we're seeing it play out in chaos, aren't we?
So again, this is why it's really important, is that if you have a passion within your heart that you feel connected with a particular culture, that indicates that you've had a past life in that culture. So therefore, you need to reconnect. And so therefore, the deities and the demons, again, equals and opposites in that culture, you will have an aspect of understanding about. So that, again, we're bringing everything into a state of balance. So the death rituals, you know, there's no such thing as a Celtic shaman. Again, these are just new age terms which have to pigeonhole. So I've always
we love to put ourselves in little boxes, don't we?
So again, one thing which I feel a bit sensitive about is that I always feel a little bit uneasy when people call themselves shamans, or the female equivalent is shamanka, because these are terms for the medicine men and women in Siberia. So when the anthropologists suddenly realized that ancient traditional practices were dying out because of the stupidity of Westerners, they sent a team of anthropologists to the Siberian reindeer herders and studied their medicine men and medicine women. So when they wrote up their journals, their term for medicine man was shaman. So it became, in the New Age era, it went viral. So every medicine man became known as a shaman. But this is incorrect, because the word shaman has a specific frequency which aligns that lineage to guardian ancestors. So when you invoke shamans, or when you call yourself a shaman, if you're not from that culture, you can invoke the guardians of that lineage, and you have no awareness, or your frequency is in a state of imbalance.
Yeah, that's a very important point.
Yeah, you must almost try and use whatever your magical or esoteric terms are for your indigenous cultural medicine men and women. You must always try and use that. So in the South Pacific, I've been trained as a medicine man in that culture, and the name for the medicine men there is Yaramanu, the frequency. So when you say Yaramanu, you're using specific words or letters, and there's a particular frequency which, through that frequency, you connect to those magical ancestors. So if I said I was a shaman, I'd be, it is energetically, it's incorrect.
Yeah, I can feel it. I mean, words this is where words become so important. And again, we've lost that understanding of how important being precise is.
So if you're using a term, so in essence, these are magical terms or magical titles. And if you're using a magical title without going through the initiation, then you can get sick. So to avoid that, if you're unsure about what your medicine men and women's true magical titles are, then just call yourself a medicine man or medicine woman. Therefore, you're neutral.
Yeah.
Therefore, you will then call on. So if you're calling upon shamans or Yaramanus or Sangomas or whatever it may be, you're calling on specific lineages. Whereas if you just keep it open and call in beneficial, and again, you're calling in beneficial or helpful ancestors, medicine men, medicine women, then you can get people coming in from all cultures instead of specifically one or two.
Yes. Now, I know the word for where I am, which is in Wales, is Arwyneth. Is there, you're in the Isle of Man, aren't you? You're based in the Isle of Man. Is there a word there?
I'm not. I've asked those who are still speaking Manx. I've asked them, and they're unsure about if there was a traditional word. They were quite often just known as themselves.
Yeah.
You know, and again, and the fairy and the elves were often known as themselves.
Yeah.
This was because that they didn't want the church to know that they were reconnecting with the ancient ones. Also, is that when you use a specific word, say fairy, so fairy is F-A-E-R-Y, not F-A-I-R-Y.
Yeah.
You're using specific words. That means that you are creating an image, activating it with an emotional charge, and then you're naming it, which is the 3 principles of magic. So you're literally invoking.
Yes.
So if you say fairy, you've got the image of what that looks like. You've got an emotional charge, which could be fear.
Yep.
Name it. So as a co-creator or co-destroyer, it has to manifest in your space at some level.
Yeah.
So on the Isle of Man, we never say the word R-A-T. It's seen as one of those words that you call with it all of the connotations of what is dirty and evil and all that nonsense. So we call them longtails.
Wonderful.
So this is why fairy and the ancient ones were not called their name specifically, because you then automatically invoke them. So you call them something which was neutral.
Yeah.
For example.
Fascinating, David. It really is. Every time I talk to you, I learn something new. Death and dying. Indigenous beliefs for these islands. Let's put it that way.
So what I found over the years is that when you're doing the Celtic funeral, and again I'm using the word Celtic so that people are able to hang their hat on.
Yeah.
Traditionally, you would have 4 candles. So one would be at the head, one at the foot, and one either side. So you would stand before the body and with a staff, and then you would call in each of the directions and the elements, so the guardian of each. And then from each direction, you would call back a soul fragment.
Yeah.
Person which is attached to anything they have an emotional attachment to people, places, objects, or things.
Yeah.
So the spirit and the soul are different. The spirit is an aspect of you which is everlasting and cannot be corrupted by the stupidity of humans. Whereas the soul is different. So the soul is that aspect of you which is held within the heart center.
Yeah.
And in the Celtic tradition, depending on who you connect with, they either say that we have 3 souls or one oversoul which has 3 specific parts to it.
Yeah.
So these are held and nurtured in the soul cauldrons. So you've got 3. So it's the belly, the heart, and the head. The belly is the vital cauldron, the heart is the personal cauldron, and the head is the wisdom cauldron. So these are the different aspects of our soul consciousness in the Celtic tradition. So the guardian consciousness of the one in the belly is the power animal. That's to do with your survival and your sensuality and procreation, sexuality. The one in the heart is to do with your emotions and your passion. So that's your soul passion. The one in the head is to do with your connection to higher self and your wisdom keepers. So the guardian here is high elves, the shining ones. The guardian here is the soul shepherd. So the reason why this being is called a soul shepherd is because that if you are lost the soul shepherd is on the mountaintops with a staff, looking for you like a shepherd, looking for a lost part. This is why Jesus was known as the shepherd.
Yeah.
He had a staff. So the soul shepherd always has a staff, and invariably they're usually half animal and half human. So this one is mythological.
Yep.
In the belly is animal. So the one in the middle is the one which is the point of balance. So it's usually half animal and half mythological being.
Yeah.
What the church understood. So they wanted to take that mythology out of our souls. So that it became soulless and therefore more easy to manipulate.
Yeah. That's a very good point, because I mean, bringing the mythology back into our lives feels very important at this moment. It feels like it's like an oasis in the desert for us at the moment. It really is. Yeah.
So the aspect of the Celtic funeral ritual is that you're calling back all of these disconnected soul fragments.
Yeah.
So your soul fragments can disconnect from each of these three cauldrons. And they're like, if you like, the reason why they're called cauldrons is because that in the ancient days, the only receptacle that our ancestors had was the old cast iron cauldron. So it was used for everything, for cooking, for alchemy, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So you can see them as crystal goblets or crystal bowls. It's just a receptacle to hold consciousness.
Yeah.
And it comes down like a champagne fountain.
Yeah.
So you've got this intense white light from the source, which comes down, and this is white and gold here, and that overflows into here, which is red, and overflows into the base, which is black, and then it continues into the earth. So these are the three Celtic colors: white, red, and black. So you're calling back each of the deceased's soul fragments from anything which they are emotionally attached to. Otherwise, they will pass and not go into the realm of the ancestors, but possibly into the grey lands, which is the no man's land in between.
Yeah.
But each time you do a direction, you then blow out a candle, and then that candle is then given to a female relative who is bereaved. And then when the crown candle is blown out, that goes to the principal female mourner. And then the candles are used then for family celebrations. And offerings are also made as well for the corpse, for the body. So the idea is that when the crown candle is blown out, that's when the last remaining soul fragment of the deceased leaves.
Yeah.
If nobody tells them when to leave, they're going to think, well, do I stay?
Yeah.
No. And so quite often, so the idea and the origin of the funeral service or the funeral rituals was to let the deceased know that it was for their benefit. It's not for the benefit of the bereaved.
Yeah, and we've turned that right around, haven't we? We talk about funerals being for the living, not the dying, and it's kind of missing the point, really, that it's helping the soul on its way. Because my understanding, and correct me if it's wrong, is that it's a process of disconnection. It's not just kind of like, a guillotine coming down.
Yeah. It's a process of disconnection, and what happens in the Celtic tradition is that as you're developing in the womb, the different elements, the 5 elements come in, and it's the same process when you start the dying process and transition into rebirth. So what happens is that when it's your time to die, the element of earth starts to break down, so your body gets less responsive, it gets heavier. You then start to depend on others, and then the next element to break down and leave is the element of fire. So that's your passion, the heat from your body. You often start to get coldness from the feet up to the legs, so the heat in your body starts to go. The next element is water. So your eyes, your mouth, the urine output starts to dry up. And then the last element to leave is the element of air, which is the final breath. And so in the Celtic tradition, the element of earth is in the north, fire is in the south, water is in the west, air is in the east. So it's the earth, fire, water, air.
Yeah.
So that's the Celtic cross.
Yeah.
And the Celtic cross is often done in that fashion. You hold your hands up with two fingers up and the thumb out. And that is that's right. And that's the symbol of non-aggression before fairy. So
Right.
when you stand like that, you're letting your ancestors and the fairy world know that you're in ritual and you are non-aggressive. And of course, St. Patrick stole it.
Yes.
So that's the origin. Is that so? Again, the Christian cross is out of alignment, and so therefore, when the origin of the Christian or Roman Catholic cross is that they were cutting you from your third eye to your pubic bone.
Yeah.
So you're cutting the person and won't do it in front of you because it will have the same effect on you. So when you're doing it with intent, you cut for the person from the third eye right the way down their core and across their heart. So you're dismembering them energetically.
Wow.
Which makes you weak.
Yeah.
So they've got more control.
Yeah.
The origin of baptism is that they're closing down your third eye so you don't have access to your ancestors. It's barbaric, it's cruel.
It is.
They're the origins.
Yeah.
With the Celtic cross, you've got the equal arms. So the equal arms are masculine.
Yeah.
Two equal arms of masculinity are then held by a globe of divine femininity.
Yeah.
So it's in a state of balance.
Mm.
If somebody has had a baby, the womb space is then still open and vulnerable, and it's a place of entity attachment.
Yeah.
It's a very, very powerful place in the female body. So the womb is, and even for those who are deceased, so the womb space on a woman is always anointed or consecrated. And so again, it's the Celtic cross or the Celtic globe. So it's the earth, fire, water, air, ether, and then it's not a two-dimensional flat sigil. It's a ball, it's a sphere, it's a globe, and then gently pass that into the body, into the womb space of the female, and that keeps all entities out, and that draws back the spirit of the womb, of the uterus, of the belly, and it keeps her pure and clean.
Yeah. Wow. Just keep talking there because it's just wonderful what you're sharing with us. You mentioned there pregnancy and birth. What about stillbirth or miscarriage or?
Yeah. So one of the things to bear in mind, and again, this is a controversial subject. So you can either share it or you can't. So to those who are open to it, this is just information which can be passed on to help others who may be distressed or bereaved. Quite often what happens is that when somebody miscarries, then it's nature's way of purging the womb.
Yeah. As a naturopath, that is one of the understandings that I have of it. Mm.
Yeah. So again, most of the things that we're suffering from or struggling with are not our stuff personally. It's what we have inherited from our ancestors, epigenetics and all that business.
Yeah.
So if you've had an ancestor who's had a major trauma in the past, the witch burning times, that sort of thing, all those things are passed through the DNA into us. So all that sort of trauma, or all the medieval torture and horror, for example, tribal warfare, battles, Second World War, whatever it may be, wherever there's been trauma, that is, your body goes into, and then that goes into the DNA and the cellular consciousness.
Yeah.
And that's not processed by shaking. When an animal has been chased by dogs or something and it escapes, it goes into this shake. So it's processing the trauma of the adrenaline and whatever it may be. And so if we don't go into that process, then that energy and the toxins are left in the body and energetic counterpart. That is then passed into the DNA of the next generation.
Yeah.
The same principle happens in an abattoir, is that the animals know that they're going to be killed.
Yeah.
And so by the time the whatever the process is, whatever, by the time that they're actually killed, the animal's in so much stress that the meat is filled with toxic chemicals.
Yeah. And energetically, we take that in.
So this is why it's very important. So again, talking about diet, meat, abattoirs, that's all part of death and dying.
Yeah.
Because it's affecting what we put inside us internally.
Yes.
So this is why it's very, very important to actually bless your food. So you bless your food, and if you're eating any part of an animal, and you bless the animal that gave its life that you may live.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that you can do is that if you're driving, and providing it's safe to do so, if you come across any animal that you've seen killed on the roadside, then what I do, or what Spirit have taught me to do, is that you call, say, a magpie, rabbit, whatever, you call that creature to you, and you hold it within your etheric arms, and then you wait for it to de-stress, so it'll start to shake, and then all of a sudden it will calm down, and you may sigh. So when you sigh, it means that you process that trauma for the being that's held in your lap. And then open a portal in the countryside, and then you send the animal through the portal, and it will run off or fly away, but it always looks back and acknowledges you, and then you close the portal again. Or what you could say is that, please open the portal and keep it open for all who wish to pass, and when this process is being completed, close it automatically.
Right.
Please leave them open. If you open a portal, you never leave them open.
Yeah.
So you must instruct somebody to close it when it is the appropriate time.
Well, that kind of leads me on to our pets. You know, my thinking is going from there, wild animals, to our pets, who we take into vets and have them put down and things like that. But again, we really don't create any space for that. I mean, how can someone help, you know, a much loved pet through that process? These are such clinical places to go to.
When an animal dies naturally in the wild, its soul goes back into the collective oversoul of its species.
Yeah.
It rejoins the pack. It rejoins that plant species or that mineral species, whatever it may be. But when an animal is killed through human intervention, through, say, a road traffic accident, that's not natural. So it needs a little bit of help. Again, with pets, what happens is that pets, one of the aspects of pets is that they agree to share our emotional and psychological pain. So these beings are, they have huge hearts, huge souls, and their next step in incarnation will be as human.
Right.
So in Asia, the elephants, for example, are seen as the last level of animal species before they then incarnate into the human form. West, it will be horses, dogs, cats, that sort of thing. So because our pets start to share our personal grief, our resentments, our jealousy, our bitterness, whatever it may be, as well as our joys, they will take our pain from us. So quite often somebody who has cancer of a particular part of the body, their cat or their dog will manifest that to share their suffering, to ease their stress. So when a pet dies, then if intervention isn't given to them, they are stuck.
Yeah.
They don't belong to the natural world. They kind of don't belong to our world. So quite often you'll find that in the grey realms, our pets who have taken on this burden for us are actually stuck. So you can do lots of prayer work or offerings, and just to make sure that they go through the veil. To where they're meant to be.
Yeah.
And you don't, the ritual doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be long-winded, and you don't need to put all your feathers and your crystals and your robes on. Just a simple, quiet prayer, calling in the guardians of the portals to open the portals, and you make sure that you pass your loved one through, because they're part of the family. You pass it through, and then you hand them over to an ancestor or a guardian who then takes responsibility for them. Then you step back, close the portal, and that's complete.
Yeah. And that's an act of loving service.
Yeah. So you're not abandoning them, you're handing them over to a spirit ally who knows exactly where they need to go and what needs to happen for their healing.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm sure a lot of people will find, comfort in that, because our pets don't last as long as us, and so it is traumatic. It is traumatic when they die, and not knowing what to do. I think that's the whole truth of everything to do with death and dying. We don't know what to do, because we've been taken away from that understanding. Can we come to a human now? If one of our family or a loved one is in the dying process, how can we sit with them? How can we help? How can we ease the whole process?
Each death is completely different. So you can't act, there's no real format that you can say, well, we do A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
So everyone is different. Everyone has different belief systems. So, for example, in our different cultures, we all have different belief systems. Therefore, in certain cultures, when somebody decides to take their own life, it's not classed as suicide. But in the West, it's classed as something which is bad or evil, and you won't go to heaven and all this Christian nonsense.
Yeah.
So again, they're just cultural belief systems. So somebody, for example, who lives in a barren environment such as a desert or cold wastelands, if there's not enough food for their family or their tribe, they will walk off into the blizzard or into the desert, so that others may live. And that's seen as an act of sacred spiritual sacrifice.
Yeah.
So it's not classed as suicide. The same with the Tibetan lamas who set themselves on fire, either in protest against aggression, or they call upon all of the toxic psychic phenomena from their community, and then they burn that as they set themselves on fire. So that's not classed as suicide. It's classed as an act of service to community.
Yeah.
So when somebody in suicide, for example, is quite often you'll find that because suicide in the West is seen as something which is not right or even evil, these spirits, because they have been indoctrinated in this belief system, they themselves won't go through the veil because they feel that they're not worthy.
Yeah.
They're not worthy to go forwards and, if you like, to sit at the hand of God.
Yeah.
And so they stay in the grey worlds. So what happens then is that in the grey worlds, or the grey lands between here and there, you get lots of spirits who are stuck. And so you get multiple entities attached to other entities. And so if somebody is in a state of vulnerability, for whatever reason it may be, and it only may be that day, then their frequency drops and they become open and aware or available to anything of a lower frequency. So quite often a suicide ghost will attach.
Yeah.
The suicide ghost has another suicide attachment as well. And so they're suddenly overpowered or overwhelmed with the feelings of suicide because of the suicide ghosts attached to them, that they just do it. And there's no thought about the process. It just, and then people think, well, why did they do that? There's no reason for it. That's because that suddenly they became so vulnerable, and a suicide ghost moved in, and it was because of that manipulation that they did it. So again, you can then go into the grey worlds, the grey realms, and then you can.
Would this be the same as many people refer to the astral? Would that?
Yes.
That's the equivalent. Yeah.
Just give you a bit of boring head stuff. There in the medieval days, there were 144 known dimensions. That was in the medieval days. So there's obviously far more than that. Each dimension has 12 overtones. So where in the probably we're in the 11th overtone of third dimension. We're moving into fourth dimension, and shortly we'll just jump into fifth, which never happened before. So it's quite exciting times, challenging but exciting. And so what happens is that as you move through these different overtones, you become less dense.
Yeah.
If you're at the bottom overtone of a dimension, you're more dense than if you were at the top. So with humanity, you would be at, say, a very low tribal level, a primitive level. And then when you worked your way through the different overtones to the 12th, then you would be a fulfilled and enlightened human being. You wouldn't incarnate again unless you chose to do so to help humanity in some way.
Yeah.
Then you go on into the next cycle and so on.
Yeah.
So there's all these different levels of consciousness. So when somebody passes over, if they have no spiritual awareness, then they will normally pass into the lower realms of the fourth dimension, which is the lower astral.
Yeah.
And so when they're stuck in the lower astral, they know less than what we do. So a lot of people think that when somebody dies, they automatically become enlightened. Well, they don't. It's the same as what they were then. They may have a bit more awareness, but then they're stuck because they don't know where to go or what to do.
Yeah.
So when you do work, between the worlds and look for these souls, then you can start to instruct them on where to go and what to do, and get allies and sisters to help them.
And that's part of my understanding, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, is that kind of what you believe about death is really what you manifest after death. So if you believe in purgatory and hell and damnation, and you believe that's what you deserve, then that kind of you manifest that horror for yourself afterwards.
That's right.
And and if you have a very spiritual belief about what happens after, then again we continue creating our reality, as it were.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, the Christian last rites, the origin of that was to keep you trapped between the worlds, so that you wouldn't move into the realm of the ancestors.
What would be the purpose for that? Why would they have done that?
Well, originally the church controlled you prior to birth, during birth, your whole living life, and after death. They completely had you trapped. So if you go into a Roman Catholic churchyard, it's full of trapped souls. If you go into a non-Roman Catholic churchyard, there's none. There might be a cat or a mouse or something, but there's no people, because it's a belief system. So, people who are not Roman Catholic, they believe that they're going to meet their ancestors or whatever. So they it just happens.
Yes.
Whereas Roman Catholics, the ones who are really indoctrinated, they're so fearful about passing to go into purgatory or hell and damnation, that they're trapped. So sometimes when you're clearing trapped souls who are Roman Catholic, they will not go unless a priest comes. So you have to then call in a Roman Catholic spirit priest to come in, who will then do whatever is required, and then they'll go off with them. So again, you have to work with people's belief systems and cultures and traditions, and try and use their language and their terminology as best you can, and try not to judge or force your beliefs onto others. You have to try and do what they need. It's not what you want as a carer. But then, when you're looking after somebody, you can be a caregiver or a caretaker. So again, a caretaker is someone it's conditional, whereas a caregiver is that, so a caretaker will do what they want, and a caregiver will do, well, what is it that you need? So when somebody is dying, their senses become far more magnified, very, very sensitive. So the slightest noise, or if you're wearing really strong perfumes or aftershaves, or even strong soap, air fresheners, mobile phones going off, you could actually start to shatter their etheric body, because they're in a state of distress, because these sounds and smells and sensations are just overpowering. So when starting to withdraw, their soul becomes huge. It takes up the whole room, and quite often you'll feel a different temperature change. As somebody's dying, make sure that any mirrors that are in the room are covered.
Yeah, that's important, isn't it?
You may go through a mirror and get stuck. Traditionally on the Isle of Man, up until the 1990s, in our hospital, they always opened the door or window in the ward to allow the soul to leave. So again, people laugh at that, but the fact is that at an energetic level, because we are co-creators, they were opening a portal.
Yes.
For the ancestors to come in to take away the remaining soul part. But the last remaining soul fragment of the deceased always remains until the funeral service.
Yeah.
And that's when you instruct them, this is the time to go. So go, say goodbye.
Yeah. Now, some cultures, the Muslims, for example, like to get the body into the ground very, very quickly. In our culture, it can take weeks and weeks and weeks while all the paperwork is gone through and etc. I mean, is there an optimum time, or does it not really matter?
In the Celtic tradition, the optimum time is 3 days and 3 nights as a vigil. After that, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So when somebody dies, ideally you should allow 3 days and 3 nights for the last remaining soul fragments to disengage.
Yeah.
So the physical body dies, the physical body goes back to the earth consciousness.
Yeah.
So traditionally, the physical body, can only be disposed of in 4 ways. So it's either through the earth, it's burial, fire, cremation, sea barrels, water, or air barrels, which you are put on a temple roof or into the charnel grounds.
Yeah.
So it's 3 days and 3 nights as the vigil. So when our physical body dies, the physical body has to go back into earth consciousness, either through all of those elements or into one of them specifically. Then the etheric body goes then into the etheric counterpart of the earth consciousness. And any trauma that's left in the etheric body stays in the etheric body of the earth. Then the emotional body is released into the emotional context of the emotional body of the earth. And any baggage we have stays in that frequency. And then the mental aspect stays in the mental aspect or the mental frequency of our planet, because it's a living organism.
Yeah.
So then when we incarnate, then as we come back in, we collect our bags that we've left behind.
Right.
And then continue with that process if an ancestor doesn't or descendant doesn't work through it.
Yeah.
So in the Celtic tradition, ideally you would have 3 days and 3 nights to allow the last remaining soul fragments to disengage and withdraw. After that process, it doesn't matter. The body is just a shell.
Yeah.
So again, with the Jews, somebody sits with the body for a certain amount of time. There have been a case. I trained as a undertaker on the Isle of Man, and we had the major problems was that the doctor would not sign off the death certificate in the hospital. And then you go in to get the death certificate, and then he'd gone off to Bermuda or somewhere such, and you couldn't contact him, which meant then that you had people coming in from all over the world for the funeral. So the funeral had to be postponed, and then the body had to be put in a freezer until the doctor could come back and sign it. But no other doctor would sign it, but that wasn't their patient.
Yeah.
Bureaucracy is just...
It is. It seems to me that, modern dying is as much about a system as it is a personal process.
And I think it's all to do with litigation as well. Is that, if you are the consultant or the doctor seeing somebody who's dying in some sort of institution or facility, is that nobody else will go there because it's their responsibility, and then they don't want to make a mistake and get sued and one thing or another.
Yeah.
So most of these medical interventions are not necessary. They're just so that the family can the doctors can show the family that something has been done.
Yeah, yeah. So if your loved one, say, dies in a hospital, or there is, there's likely to be quite a time to the funeral for whatever reason, maybe it needs investigating or something like that. I mean, as a family or even as an individual, could you just sit in vigil? I mean, you don't need to be next to the body, do you? Could you just sit in vigil, maybe at home, and help the soul on its way?
So ideally, if you know that your loved one is dying and they're at home, make sure, it's really important, make sure that a GP or a healthcare professional of some sort comes and monitors that person.
Yeah.
So if you die within a month of a GP seeing you, then no post-mortem is required if they know that you're dying from a terminal condition.
Yeah.
If you die at home without having seen a GP, then you will have to have a post-mortem by law. So one of the things I trained in an Australian hospital was I was a post-mortem technician and mortuary attendant. And I specialised in opening the skull for brain removal. Not pleasant subjects, but this is part of life.
Yeah, yeah.
So when I then did my training in the South Pacific, I'm the last skull keeper in the Yeramanu, the white serpent lineage of the South Pacific, because just by, if you like, coincidence, I was the only person who had actually done skull rituals, opening the skull ritualistically, whereas of course it's illegal to do that now over there. Part of their cannibalistic mortuary practices, and that's all been blown out of context by the church and authorities.
Yeah.
So it's the cannibalistic rituals are not what they say they are. They're quite different.
Yeah.
So when you die, ideally you'll sit with the body for 3 days and 3 nights, or somebody, so that you're comforting the last remaining soul fragment. As you pointed out, if the person dies in an institution of some sort, that's going to be impractical. So you can then just call that remaining soul fragment back home if you can't get them home to die.
Yeah.
And you can do the vigil by doing that. And when somebody dies who you love, you're in such a state of being distraught and upset, you can't think straight. And so people will tend to bully you. You need to do this, you need to do that. Or the hospice nurses or the district nurses may come in, and we'll see to it you go and have a cup of tea, and you can't even speak. You're so distressed, you can't even speak, and so you're burdened to do things, and your heart is screaming that you want to do these rituals for your wife or your loved one, but pushing you out, and you've got this inner conflict going on. But then after everything's settled and you still feel that you need to bring closure to that situation, then you can just create sacred space, and then you call back the soul fragment of your loved one, and then you just imagine that you are bathing them, anointing them, you are consecrating them, you are dressing them, you're doing their hair, you're doing their nails, you do the whole thing, and that is just as valid.
So it's effectively you create an energetic scenario.
And so they will know that you are ready to do that, and so therefore that soul part of your loved one, which will still be linked to you by an emotional or energetic cord, will come back.
Yes.
That's when you disconnect, and then you see it back go.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk, David, in some of your the notes I've read about becoming a soul watcher, and there's something about that is so profound, and I just love the idea. And you do run workshops on death and dying, don't you? Is this the training to become a soul watcher?
At the moment, the workshops I'm running is the death and dying aspect is a part of the advanced workshops. But next year I'm running workshops specifically for death and dying.
Yeah.
And it's to go over the process of, you know, what happens prior to death, taking care of the person who's dying, their needs, the environment, what happens after death, and so on and so forth, all different possibilities, and how to treat the body, and then how to do the funerary rituals.
Yeah.
So you know, it's such a privilege to be asked to prepare somebody's body and to do their funeral service. And one of the things that I have to point out is that no matter what you call yourself, if you are a medicine man or medicine woman or whatever lineage that is, if you have not done the funerary rituals, you're not a medicine man or a medicine woman. You are training to be. And, you know, even though I've done these rituals and others have done them as well, you're still training all the time.
Yeah.
One of the major aspects of being a medicine person is that you know, one of the, probably the most important actually, is to make sure that the death and dying aspect, the protocols and the rituals, are hands-on. And if you haven't done any of the hands-on work, you can't call yourself a medicine man or medicine woman.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we are kept away from death to a very large degree in our society. I became a police special many years ago, and one of my main motivations was because I knew nothing about death, and I didn't know. I felt it was an important understanding and experience to have, and I didn't. The only way I could think of to access it was either through the police or through becoming a nurse, which, you know, I'm not built that way. So and I'm very glad I did, because I found it very, very profound. And I was also with my father when he passed over, and it was, as you say, it is a privilege to be with someone when they die, and it was one of the most moving and most uplifting, which was what I didn't expect, but one of the most uplifting experiences of my life. And to know how to behave, and by the time my father died, I had learned quite a lot. To know how to help someone to have a good death is a wonderful gift to be able to give anyone, isn't it?
So one of the problems we have in the West is that a lot of people are so medicated, either with allopathic or recreational drugs, is that they don't have a good death. And so what I mean by that is that they die being disconnected or confused.
Yeah.
So for someone to have a good death, they need to have clarity of mind.
Yeah.
And so one of the things you can do is that you can whisper in their left ear. So the left side is the receptive feminine side. And so if you can find out before they go into a state of, you know, unconsciousness or whatever it may be, that, you know, do they have a favorite chant or favorite prayer or words or poem, whatever it may be, then you can just whisper that into their left ear. And one of the things which is really important is that people need to know that they are forgiven.
Yes.
Either for what we have done or what we haven't done, said or what we haven't said. So everybody across the board, at some level, when you get to the point when you're about to cross over, all of these things come up. I shouldn't have done this. I should have said this. So we all need to know that you are forgiven.
Yeah.
You're beautiful. You are forgiven. You know, we're now calling in the ancestors. So traditionally, when I was a boy, the coffins were handmade by the joiners. They were painted with tar on the inside to make them waterproof. They put plastic in nowadays, which is not biodegradable. Great. And so they always were given, you know, remember the old-fashioned pennies?
Yes.
An old-fashioned penny or any coin now was either put in their hand, in the person's pocket when they were dressed, or sometimes put in their mouth. And again, that was symbolic of an offering for the guardian intercessor to take them from here to there.
Yeah.
But what I found over the years is that in the olden days, the ferryman was somebody who came across very much like a person who was ragged in appearance, dark, who was a little bit sinister looking. As I've moved through this process, what's happening now is that the high elves are coming, and they're coming in crystal boats, and it's absolutely beautiful. And
That's amazing.
These beautiful beings of pulsating light just slide up on this crystalline boat, and then the soul is just placed in the boat, and the energy is just unbelievable. And then, you know, they just glide off, and then they usually go through the mist. And once through the mist, then you know that they're going to be taken into the care of their ancestors and loved ones.
That's very beautiful.
It's rebirth. It's beautiful. To those who are listening, please don't be afraid of death. We're often afraid of how we will die. We're not usually afraid of death, but we're afraid of how we will die. And again, it's cultural perception. Will we be alone? Will we be in pain? Will we be in fear? But once you get rid of all that stuff, then you call in the ancestors and loved ones, and then they will go. You'll just go through them.
Yes. Yeah.
So so again, different traditions. You might have the ferryman who comes, and what I'm doing now is that I'm finding that it's the high elves who come, or ferry, in these crystalline boats. Sometimes what happens is that in different cultures it may be the Valkyries, or it could be other intercessors, depending on your culture or your belief system. So whatever works for you is appropriate for your culture.
Yeah. Yes. Wonderful. David, there is so much more we can talk about. I know there is. It is a very profound and very touching topic, actually, and one that isn't talked about enough. So I can only sort of thank you for being prepared to do this, and being prepared to help people, to help others into a good death. So I hope we could talk again at some point on other topics, but this is a great blessing to have. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
And thank you for all the work you do. And can I just also take a moment to tell people that apart from the workshops that you run, and I'll make sure people have the means to contact you to find out about those, but you also do clearings and healing work, don't you? If you want to just take a quick moment to tell people about that.
So I can do face-to-face work, but I prefer now to do remote work, because you can go in further and deeper. So I can, or when I say me and my spirit team, we can clear properties anywhere in the world from any toxic psychic phenomena, or do personal clearings for people, which a lot of it is ancestral stuff. Most people have attachments. You know, it's because we're in third dimensional consciousness, it's normal to be possessed.
Yeah.
So the word possessed or possession just simply means you have attending spirits in your space. There's nothing necessarily sinister about it. It's the same thing with, words over time change their meaning.
Yes.
So again, the word occult just means hidden.
Yes.
The word pagan just means dweller in the wild places. The word heathen means dweller in the heath or the mountain. That's all they mean.
Yeah.
And so one of the things you must be careful of is that when you're connecting with ancestors and allies, that you must be specific about the wording you use, because if they passed in an older generation, they may have a different understanding of the word you use now.
Yeah. Yes, that's important.
So, for example, and the example is gay. So we now know people who are gay are now people of a particular gender who like each other. But then in the olden days, it was somebody who was, colourful, cheerful, happy party goers.
Merry and
the severity of the Second World War. So again, words change. So be careful about the words you use.
Right. Great advice. Yes, we come back to again, words are so important. Yeah. David, once again, thank you. Thank you so much. And to everyone listening, I hope you found that interesting. I think there's a lot there that may play out in you. If you want to know more, obviously contact David. But in the meantime, thank you, David, and thank you to everyone listening, and goodbye.